All right. Thanks, everybody. Grateful to be back for this second session here. And we meant to say this at the beginning, so we were remiss in doing this, so I was reminded to do this. We debated about whether we were going to do a little question and answer session, and we kind of scuttled that. But if you have questions, see Lori. She'd be happy to answer those. Apparently she's got all the answers. I don't know. But anyway, no, if you got questions, we're grateful to talk to you we're going to be here all weekend, hopefully present. And or if you got a question, write it down. We'll do it next session before we'll do whatever. This is you guys' deal, really. It's not our show. We just happen to be kind of facilitating here. So if you got a question, or write them down, or just talk to us anytime this weekend. That's what we're here for, is just to be here to be a service to you folks. So whatever works, we're happy to do that. And thanks for all the kind remarks in the bathroom and elsewhere. So anyway, there you go, Patrick. So talk a little bit, when we talk about our families and messages to our families and how that looks, and we really wanted to talk about, extending that, because family recovery, and certainly we don't want to take away from what the conference and committees ask us to do this weekend. We certainly want to do that. And I'll just say this before I move on, is that one of the biggest things I think that helped Lori and I, and she can certainly disagree when it becomes her part, but I think one of the biggest things that really helped us was taking the traditions off the wall and putting them in our life, and began to look at our spiritual unit and how we self-govern our unit and how that works for us. The biggest threat in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm Al-Anon because they've adopted traditions, is disunity. Why the first tradition states the problem, unity. Disunity causes great consternation in our fellowship. So disunity is the problem. And the second tradition, as the second step does, tells us the solution to that. If the problem is disunity, what's the solution? God, as He express Himself in our group conscience. And then traditions 3 through 11 tell us the things we don't do. The steps 3 through 11 tell us the things we do to make, to give us, get us in touch with the power. In the traditions, 3 through 11 tell us things we don't do. We don't divert ourselves from these other things. We have a primary purpose. We have a requirement for membership. We do these things, and we don't. If we get away from those things, we lose. We have disunity, and so we tried to take those traditions off the wall and try to bring those into our life. And I think that has been a great benefit for our relationship, is to, and we talked about doing that workshop this weekend, but this is about all I'm going to say about it, is that bringing those into our lives and intertwining those, praying together, doing those things to find the God consciousness in our spiritual unit. And so those have been a great benefit to us. But when we thought about this weekend and doing this, and we could have done all that, but we wanted to talk a little broader in terms of our families. Some of us, I sponsor a lot of guys that get here. They come from broken families. I know a lot of people come to Alcoholics Anonymous, part of a broken family. Maybe not the nuclear family that some people came up in, different absent fathers, absent mothers, whatever. Particularly the guys I work with, absent fathers. Sometimes we fill in the gap. We stand in the gap for those men and women that come into our lives, and we have a role we play in their lives. Our families look different today. We have a family, absolutely. Lori and I and our kids, grandkids. But our family begins as we, at least for me, as I got sober, my family began to expand and what that looked like. in my life. I call him a kid, but because he's a kid, and he's 30-something. Been sober since he was 15. And he's 20 years sober now. 35, I guess he is. Down in Houston. And he's been married, I don't know, 7-8 years. And when he and his wife got pregnant, I was the first phone call he made. He didn't call his mom, didn't call his dad, called me. And that's what I'm talking about. We become an important piece of other people's lives, whether we want that or not. Whether by design or default, we become a part of the fabric of other people's lives as they have with us. As they have become such an important part of our lives. My very first sponsor, Don, I remember the very first Christmas that Lori and I celebrated after I got sober. We had Christmas dinner at our house, and it was Lori and I and Don. And but that also about represented the number of friends I had at that time too. I push everyone out of my life. I push them all out. But our sponsors' relationship becomes so critical for us. And I know what that looks like. I know what that was like for me with Don. But I forget sometimes and can't consciously see that working, that somebody that I sponsor. It's difficult for me to see that some people feel about me the way I felt about Don or I feel about Bob today. I mean, I can't grasp that in my head that's that way. But the truth of the matter is that it becomes that way. And so it becomes really important, I believe, for a guy like me to understand that relationship and the message I'm giving to those people. Perhaps in some ways the most important place that I make the message really clear of what the message is or what my message is. Because Bill Wilson said in the Concept 9 in the Secret Service Manual, I don't want to talk too much about this. People will get, they'll think I've read it. And I'll be X'd out, Jimmy. Never invited back to New Jersey ever again. So. In Concept 9, Bill Wilson wrote an article, Leadership and Every Vital Need. One of the best, in my opinion, one of the best pieces Bill ever wrote. And everybody's got different opinions on that, and certainly I'm not, if you think it was something different, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying for me, in my experience, one of the most valuable pieces of writings Bill ever did. And in that, at the very kind of towards the end of it, he talks about that every sponsor is necessarily a leader. And he talks about that sponsorship oftentimes, and I'm going to paraphrase this, is that oftentimes we're called to task to make split-second decisions on how we say and how we say it, and what we say could make the difference, life and death. Make the difference in happiness or misery for families. Make a tremendous difference. And so with that knowledge of what that piece of literature says, then necessarily that relationship between sponsorship, sponsoree relationship becomes critical. And while necessarily the messages that we give to our families, we hone that in, we find our old ideas, we work that out through the steps by continuing review of our conduct and our behavior with nightly reviews of daily inventory taken through 10 and 11. We do that process to smooth those edges out. Awareness, awakeness, that we pay attention to what's going on in my life and in our family relationships where, it becomes so critical for us. Those over time, hopefully, smooth out. But I don't know about you all, but there are nights and times that in my home group, I'm like the Dalai Lama. I mean, I'm just pontificating. At the coffee bar, I'm about 2 seconds from reaching water walker status. I mean, I could take a shower with my socks on. I'm talking about just godly, And then I get in my car, it's helter-skelter. It's just like that. And so the harmony of how all that looks, that at home, that at work, with the people I help, the people I meet on the street, the people at the grocery store, that all that comes into some harmony so I'm not fractionalized, all these different double lives I'd been leading prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, that I have some kind of oneness about me, that I'm the same guy at the meeting, that I am in traffic, that I am with my employees, that I am with my wife. This wholeness, the goal and the hope of the steps are that I can get to a spot of wholeness, that this double life no longer exists, that I have transparency, that the channel is as clear on a day-to-day basis as I can make it, and the edges get rubbed off. There was a period of time in my sobriety, I was about 8 or 9 years sober, and how I described just a moment ago at the coffee bar, I began to believe that. Busy in Alcoholics Anonymous, busy, sponsoring a lot of guys, busy in service, alternate area chair, chairing our area conference, getting asked to come and share a few words, being willing to get on my bicycle, ride 200 miles, whatever, Really making a name for myself in an anonymous organization, that in itself should describe for you the insanity of my life. And I quit sharing my experience, and I began to tell people what to do. And I was a disunifier. I'm not a producer of harmony. If I don't think your group's doing it right, I'll talk about it. I'll share it with everybody I know. I'm a traditions violator because I think I know better. Believing that this very didactic approach, this very, is this my way or the highway kind of approach is the way. Very evangelical, I'm not a 12-stepper, I'm a 12-stomper. Just beat you down with that book, man. And believing that was in my head, have convinced myself that this is it. And I came home one day, and Lori said to me, "Hey, sit down, I need to talk to you." I said, "Okay. Let me check my schedule." "Okay, I can do that. You got 5 minutes or whatever." And she looked at me, she said, "I love you, but I know you're physically sober, but you're not spiritually sober, you're not emotionally sober, and you have to go." And being a big shot in AA, this was quite the news. And I had been thrown out of my house before, but not in sobriety, certainly. And but I went without rancor. I didn't argue. I just left, and I went to Don's house. And I sat down and was telling him, and I want you to know that it wasn't like people had not tried to tell me about my behavior and about my message. But I can't hear it. I can become really self-directed here, believing I'm doing God's will. very self-directed, believing I'm doing God's will. I can get cut off from the sunlight again from listening to myself. I can begin to clog the channel by listening to myself and believing I'm doing right and believing I'm doing good. And I remember sitting down with Don, and this ever happened to you people, that you hear this really loud noise and this bright light, and then you realize that your head flying out of your bottom, just suddenly you're just over. That's what that was. And I remember saying to Don that day is that, man, I just got to get back to basics. And once again, it's like God drags out the silver hammer and just tinks me on the head. Those words went out of my mouth. I don't know if you guys have ever had a moment when you talk to your sponsor and think, gosh, I wish maybe if I just change subject, they won't remember that. Just grab that and pull it back. They won't remember it. But in that moment when I said it, it's like as if there's something else here. As if we have anything else other than trust God, clean house, help others. As if we have anything else here. None of us here levitate to any guru status. Any kind of, love what Liz said this, just our turn. It's just my turn. We just get turns here. My turn's over, I'll have a turn to do something else, but just my turn today. But I had this idea that I'm at this status where I'll minister to you people, and hopefully one day you can elevate, right? You can get here. And I just had this crushing blow of suddenly became, what's the message that I've been given to these guys that God has put in my path and sent to me for help? That I have created an atmosphere for where now they're afraid of me. They don't want to come talk to me about what's going on in their life because they're afraid. Because I've created a atmosphere of this, I'll yell at you. This is how you do it. Don't bring me that BS. And man, it was like, bam. And I've discovered here that we can become spiritually ill in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous here. And it is so important for me to keep the channel clear so that the right message gets passed. And to remember that it's not my message, that it's the message that gets passed. It is not my interpretation of the message. It's my experience with the message that I come to pass along. And in that moment when I had this realization, I got, for about, 70, 90 days, somewhere like that. I'm sure Lori knows exactly how long when I was out of the house. That I got this time for reflection again. We talk in here sometimes about a second surrender. I've had second, thirds. There's just never enough to go around. There's plenty of surrenders here, And I think if I could explain to people sufficiently, if I could just get the formula to share with you, if you do these things, you'll be surrendered. But, that's impossible. Because surrender, like everything else here, is this experiential thing that has to be done individually. We can't prescribe it. I can't write it up for you. I can't tell you how to burn your life to the ground sufficiently that you'll ask for help and be surrendered. It comes to us, as the book describes, as moments of incomprehensible demoralization. We talk about it in here as the gift of desperation. What I know is just grace. It's just grace. So what happened is that in that moment, when I said that to Don, this realization, you can come to Alcoholics Anonymous and do everything the steps prescribe and have this awakening that the 12-step promises, one of the greatest promises that we have here, this awakening. But anybody who's been here for any appreciable amount of time, have watched people come here, have an awakening, backtrack through the steps, go back to sleep, walk out our door and leave. Go right back to sleep. Sometimes in the room of AA, go back to sleep, Or my friend Bob D says, I'm here today for the newcomer or the person here today that's about to leave, that's compromising themselves one small compromise at a time to walk out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's why the message that what's important for me, the message that I have, be a pure message that is attractive. Being a dictator in Alcoholics Anonymous is not attractive to the new person. Being a dictator at my house is not attractive to my wife or my kids. Being a dictator at work is not attractive to my fellow employees, my employer, or anyone else. What I need to be is remember what these steps call for me to be, and that is a trusted servant, that I'm here to serve. That is my only function, is to love and serve, as Dr. Bob said. Love and service is what we have here. And so I began to soften in my message to the message and how I portrayed the message, how I gave the message to the people I began to sponsor. And I had to go to the guys that I sponsor and sit down with them and say, I've been a total ass. And if you want to go somewhere else and seek direction and have somebody else be your spiritual guide, you have my blessings and grace and my apologies for whatever spiritual harm I've caused you. And to a man, they didn't leave. They stayed. They all stayed. They watched me suffer through that, and they stayed with me through that. And what happened in our relationships with those guys who were with me, it deepened our commitment to each other. It deepened our commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous. It deepened our love for each other, in that the message we begin to portray, and the message, that I portrayed became the pure message of Alcoholics Anonymous, just sharing my experience. And what happened to them is they began to feel comfortable coming back and saying, this is what's going on with me, I need help. So our families, our family unit, as we think of them and we think about the message we give to our families, begin to expound and expand as we come to Alcoholics Anonymous and we stay here and we begin to carry the message. We become to affect people's lives in ways that perhaps we did not know we were. It's so important to me today when someone new is in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous to shake their hand, offer them friendship or fellowship, and most importantly, remember their name. Because most of us get here so marginalized, we have got to a spot where we don't even believe we're seen anymore. And to say to a new person in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bobby, we're glad you're here. I'm so glad you were here for this last hour. Please come back tomorrow. That they hear that you remembered their name can also make the difference of whether they come back or don't come back, or maybe life and death for the family that they belong to.
I've had the same sponsor since I got here. For the whole 21 years I've been here, I've had the same sponsor. And I did a lot of things wrong when I first got here. A lot. Almost everything, pretty much. Everything they tell you not to do, I did, and I just did. But the one thing that I did right, the only thing that I can tell you that I was consistent on, is that I always followed my sponsor's direction. I always listened to her, and I still do. I mean, no matter what she asks of me or suggests that I do, I will always do it. And it's always worked out for me. Sometimes I've thought she was crazy, but I've always followed her direction, and it's always worked out. And so she had never asked me to do anything that she hasn't been willing to do herself or hadn't gone through herself. And I try to do that with the women that I sponsor. And so, what's my message with my Al-Anon family, and with my sponsor, with my sponsees, with the people that I go to meetings with? What is my message? And so whenever Clif went through that period of time and he was over sober, and I and I asked him to leave the house, I will tell you, I have a reputation back home. I mean, automatic because of that. Whenever a girl asks me to sponsor her, and I start sponsoring her, whenever her significant other goes to a meeting that knows me, the guys know me or whatever, usually what is said is, "Who's your wife's sponsor?" And they say, "Lori," and they go, "Oh, get ready, you're going to get kicked out of the house." And I don't kick people out of the houses. I just want you to know. Now, I have had some sponsees that have asked their husbands to leave for a period of time, but I promise you, I am not the one kicking them out of the house. And but I have that reputation. That's my message, apparently. And so, anyway, but I don't suggest or ask my girls to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself, or that I haven't been through, or that I haven't done. And I hope that my walk matches my talk. I hope that I'm not saying something or suggesting something that I'm not willing to do, or that I haven't already done. And then on the same token, let me just say this: I will tell you, before I came into this program, if you were to ask me about something and I didn't really know the answer, I would just make something up and make you believe that I knew what I do, because I couldn't be wrong and I have to know everything. And I don't do that today. I have a sponsee, and she's a great member, and she's a really good mom. And I've watched her and her husband raise their daughter, and she's an excellent mother. And from the little bit that I've told you today, you might not have guessed, but I was not an excellent mother. And sometimes I have sponsees who are raising their kids, and they'll call me about something, and they'll ask for my guidance or my advice. And usually what I say to them is, "You need to call Andrea," because I don't have that experience, and Andrea is a great mom, and Andrea knows that. And so instead of trying to give them some sort of thing that I make up off the top of my head, I will guide them through the steps, and I will talk to them as far as what I think that they should do in accordance with the program. But when it comes to specific things with their kids, I don't have the answers for that. I've learned some stuff over the years, but I just don't have that experience because I was not a good mom. Now, I can tell you what I think I would have done differently and how I would have handled those situations, but I go to people who have had that experience. But I think that my message has got to follow what my walk is. And if I'm telling you to do one thing and I'm doing something else, it means I'm a fraud. I have my sponsor has. I will tell you, she's. Like I said, I've had her since I got here. She's been in the program over 40 years. I think she's the wisest woman I know, and I can't imagine, honestly. I can't imagine what I would have done without her these 21 years. And I think it was about 8 years in the program. I called her up one day and I said, "Listen," I said, "we need to have an agreement." And she said, "Okay." I said, "Now listen, before I need a favor." And I said, "Before I ask this favor, I just need you to know that I'm being selfish. And I know I'm being selfish, but I just, if you will just do this one thing for me, I won't ask any more favors of you. And she said, okay. She said, what is it? I said, you can never die. And and she goes, okay. And she's like, all right, well, we'll just have that agreement. And then we went on. But and now listen, I know that if something were to happen to her, I would find another sponsor. But she has been such an intricate part in my recovery. And she has so much knowledge and so much experience that she has passed on to me. And I, in turn, have passed that on to my sponsees. Have you ever been into a meeting and you hear your sponsees talk and they're sharing something and you go, they got that from my sponsor. When did they talk to my sponsor? And I go, oh yeah, they got that from me because I got that from my sponsor. I forget. Or have you ever had this happen? And this is one thing that is great. This is the one thing that is great about being in the program, is that it is totally God's message and God is always in charge. Have you ever heard one of your sponsees share, and they're sharing something really good stuff? I mean, really good stuff. And they go, my sponsor said this, and they share this great stuff. And you go, I've never heard that before in my whole entire life. Not only have I not said that, I've never even heard it, but that's really good. And I'm really glad that I got credit, but I have no idea where that came from. It's so true. I can't even tell you how many times that has happened. But I know that God's in charge of the message, and I know it's not me. And I love that I sometimes get credit for it, though. That's really great. But I know it's not me. And you know, like I said, when I say that I don't ask my sponsees to do anything that I'm not willing to that I haven't done or haven't gone through. I talked a lot about my son earlier, and now we're going to talk about our daughter. When Clif and I got together, I had a son who was 4, and he had a daughter that was 5. And when our daughter was about 15 or 16 years old, she started drinking. And she actually came to college here in New York, Marymount, Manhattan. She was a dance major. And she's super talented, super smart, beautiful girl. And she got hooked on pain pills. Along with the drinking, she got hooked on pain pills. And you could see it through her college. You could just, you know, she'd post stuff on Facebook, and I'd think, this is not good. This is not good. And she graduated college and came back home, and we'd go months, almost a year without seeing her or talking to her, and until she needed something, and then she'd pop in. And then about 9 years ago, 9 years ago, she finally called her daddy, and she said, you know, I can't stop drinking, and I can't stop eating pills, and I need help. And he did what he was taught to do in his rooms, and he said, well, honey, I can't help you, but here's the name of a lady in AA, and you can call her. And she did. And she went to detox, and she started going to AA, and she got sober, and she stayed sober for a year. The day before her 1-year birthday, she had the most beautiful grandbaby you've ever seen in your life. And about a year after that, she celebrated, a year after that, and she decided that she didn't need AA anymore and that she was an alcoholic. And she's been on a downward spiral ever since. And it hasn't been straight down. She's had some ups and downs, she stole money from us, and she's lied to us, and all the things that come along with alcoholism. We haven't seen her in over 4 years. She got married. She's had two other children. We have no contact with. We've never even met them. And we are grateful, though, that we do have a relationship with that eldest granddaughter. We get to see her her dad got custody of her, and every other Thursday night, we get her, and her dad and his new wife had a baby, and he's 4 years old, and we get him every other Thursday night. So we have a relationship with them, but we don't have a relationship with our daughter. That's on her. That's her choice. I know with this disease, a lot of things happen, and the things that she's done, she has shame and humiliation, and and she blames us for a lot of things, and she, all the things that we've seen over and over again. So when I have girls that come to me and they say, I can't help it. I'm going to have to give her money, or I'm going to have to let him move back home, and he's my child, and I say, I don't suggest you do that. I don't think that's a good idea. They can't say to me, you don't know what it's like, because I know exactly what it's like. And it's hard. I'm not going to tell you it's been easy. It's hard. It's awful. I hate it. I never know. I mean, I will tell you, I've had to prepare myself that I may get that phone call one day that she's overdosed, or that she's killed in a car wreck because she's drunk, or whatever. I mean, I know that could happen. But because of a few things that my sponsor has taught me, and the faith that I have in my God, of my understanding today, I know that it's going to be okay no matter what. I remember calling my sponsor years ago, and I wasn't worried about my daughter at the time, but I was worried about my son. He had motorcycles, and if you guys love motorcycles, good for you. I want you to ride them as much as you want to. I just don't particularly like my son on one. But anyway, but he was riding these motorcycles, and I was, terrified that he was going to crash and die. And again, this goes with, what's my message, and really, what message do I hear? And what happened was, I was at a conference. Clif and I were at a conference on weekend, and the lady that was the Al-Anon speaker was talking about how she had lost her son had died. And the next weekend we went to the state conference, and it was in Tulsa that year, and the Friday night speaker had lost her 2 boys, and then the Saturday afternoon speaker had lost a kid, and the Sunday morning speaker, I think, had lost a kid. It was something like that. And I left that conference, and I called my sponsor when I got home, and I go, oh my God, I think God's going to take Colby. And she goes, I don't think that was the message you were supposed to get. She said, I think the message you were supposed to get was not that God was going to kill your son, but that all those people had horrible losses, and they've made it through, and they're still a member, and they're still alive, and they're still helping other people, and they're okay. They're forever changed. They're never going to be the same. They're always going to have a great loss and a great grief, but they're still okay. And she said, do you not trust your God? And I said, of course. I go, I really do. And she said, well, then why are you worried? And I said, because he could still die. And she said, oh, I see. So you trust God, and you think that he's going to take care of them, but you still want to control the outcome. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, sometimes God takes care of them in this world, and sometimes he takes care of them in the next, and you don't get to choose. And I had to get okay with that. And so years later, when my son had the horrible motorcycle wreck, and it was bad, he had his forehead was broken into 7 pieces. He had traumatic brain injury. He had lesions and cuts on his brain, and he had the brain bleed and the swelling, and his orbital bones were broken. He had 2 black eyes, and I got the call, and I'm going to tell you, God is always in charge, and he always shows up, and I never know how it's going to look or what's going to look. But I'm going to tell you what happened is Clif and I had been gone all weekend at a conference, and we had gotten in at really late. Like, I don't think we went to bed till like 1 or 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, I got the phone call. And I didn't even hear it, my phone ring the first 2 times. And the third time that I heard it, I answered, and it was his dad. And I knew it wasn't good if his dad's calling me. And I said, what's going on? And he said, Colby's been in a motorcycle wreck. And he said, and I'm an hour and a half away. And he said, and he's up there by you. And I said, is he okay? And he said, I don't know. And so I got up and got dressed and started praying. And I went to the hospital, and on my way to the hospital, my sponsee called me. Now, if you know me, I am not a morning person. I'm going to tell you, being here at 9 o'clock was a stretch for me, but I'm not a morning person. I do not get up early. I don't. And I don't like getting up early. I just don't. Anyway, she called me, and she called me, and I answered the phone, and she goes, "Why are you up?" I go, "Why are you calling?" And she said, "Because I just got a missed call from you." And I go, "No, you didn't." And she said, "Yeah, I did. And I swear to you, I looked on my phone and there was no call made." And I said, "I just got a call. Colby's been in a motorcycle wreck. I'm headed to the hospital." She goes, "I'll meet you there." And I said, "You don't have to." She said, "I'm literally halfway there anyway." She had to drop off something that morning. And she literally pulled in the emergency room before me. And when we finally got back to see him, he was, swollen, and eyes were swollen shut, and it was scary. But he was okay. He was going to be okay. He wasn't paralyzed. He, had some surgeries he was going to have to go through, but he was okay. And I had to, and for some reason after that, that fear left me after that. I thought, well, he made it through this one. And he's had another one since then. Don't get me wrong. I'm just kind of waiting for the call. So, but he made it okay. He was fine. Our friend, my sponsee, Anessa, came with us. She comes with us like once a year. She plans a trip with us. And she doesn't know I was going to talk about this because I didn't know I was going to talk about it. And if she gets mad, she can write it on her four-step. But anyway, this last year, her daughter was in a horrible car wreck. And she called me. And I said, "I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there." And we were in the same emergency room at the same hospital that my son was in. And I did that because God put somebody there for me in the emergency room when my son was there. And so I do what I've been taught to do. And I showed up for her. And her daughter's good. She's made it and she's fine. But it was scary. I have to be an example. I have to be example. I have to do what I say I'm going to do, and I don't ask anything of my sponsees that I'm not willing to do myself or be there for myself. I'm going to tell you, it's hard to have as hard as it is, and this is just my opinion. It's an opinion. As hard as it is, and it was to have a husband who is drinking and out of control. I think it's 1,000 times harder when it's your kid. I just do. I'm not saying the pain is any greater or any. It's just hard. It's just hard. And I pray for that girl every day, almost every day. There are some days I get mad, but most days I pray for her. I ask other people to pray for her because I don't know if she's ever going to make it in these rooms again or not. I know that I can't help her anymore. I know that. So when I have. When I try to be an example to the people about me, but in my Al-Anon family, I got to tell you, I have my family of origin. I have a sister that really still doesn't get it. She doesn't understand why I'm gone so many times and why I do all this for other people. She doesn't understand why and she's getting there, but she used to have a really hard time. She'd want to go meet one weekend and I would be out of town. And she'd say, "You're just gone all the time. How come you spend so much time with those people and you don't spend that much time with your own sisters?" And I had to explain to them, those people saved our lives and saved our marriage. And that's my job, is to give back. And she gets it better now. She really does. She understands it more now than she ever has. But I believe it's our responsibility I know it's our responsibility to give back what's been given to us and to continue to do that. And, I have some things that I think are really important, and this is just what I do. I'm not telling anybody else you have to do it. I'm just saying what works for me. I've had people ask me or talk to me about, there's a lady back home and I love her to death, but she doesn't take more than like 5 sponsees at a time. That's all she'll do. She's like, "I'm just too busy." And I'm like, Really? I'm a little busy, and I take a lot more than 5 sponsees. I've never told anybody that I wouldn't sponsor them. Now, I have had a couple that I knew was not going to work out, and I've said, I'll temporary sponsor you, but you're probably going to need to find somebody else to probably work with permanently. And sometimes that's worked out, and sometimes it hasn't. But I don't ever tell anybody no, because God works all that out. I mean, you know how it is. How many people do you sponsor? About half of them. Because, they're not all active at once. They fall off. That's really the way it works. I mean, really. God works all that time out. When they're new, they're really busy. And then after they've been here a while, they don't need as much maintenance. That's just the way it is. I mean, I call my sponsor once a week. When I first started, she started sponsoring me. She had me call her every single day because I was needy. And so I call her once a week now. And sometimes if we're traveling, I don't always get that call in that week, but I'll call her later and she knows. But I never say no to anybody who asks me to sponsor them. We sit down, I tell them what is required because I have requirements. Because don't waste my time. If you want to do the work, great. But if you just want to call me with your problem of the day every single day and not do anything, you probably need to find somebody else because it's not going to work out. So I try to be an example, and I try to do what was asked of me, and I try to give back what has been given to me. And I hope that I really hope that my message and my walk match, because I think that's really, really critical in here. Because I don't want to be a fraud. I don't want to be a fraud. I want people to know that, I'm not any different in those rooms than I am when I'm at home or at work or hanging out. I'm the same person, and I have the same requirements, constants, all the time. I think that's all I have. We're going to have a 10-minute break. 10 after. We'll see you back here in 10 minutes.